Hey, well, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and leaders, welcome back to the Thrive Collective. You know, this is your show designed to help you make more money, avoid costly mistakes, and fully integrate your faith into your life, into your leadership. As your host, it is a joy to serve you. I am Rob Hughes, and welcome back. Today, we're talking leadership lessons with Mike Paton, EOS implementer and leadership icon in the EOS world, the entrepreneurial world. Mike Paton has spent his lifetime learning from entrepreneurs and leaders. And really today, he's spending all of his time giving back as an author, speaker, and a host of his own podcast. If you haven't checked out the EOS Leader podcast, do so. It's awesome. He's also a certified EOS implementer working with companies around the globe, helping them implement the power of the EOS system that Gino Wickman authored in the book Traction. Very specifically, he's passionate about helping entrepreneurs run their businesses better and live better lives by mastering those principles and some of the ideas that he's going to be sharing today with us. So buckle up. This is going to be a fun interview. Hey, Paton, welcome to the Thrive Collective.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be here. And for the record, the key to my success is lowering people's expectations. If you could just re-record that intro, that'd be great. I'm feeling a tremendous amount of pressure right
now. Good. Well, you know, I'm a firm believer, Paton, that you could tell what is inside the fruit when the pressure is on. So here we go. Buckle up, Buttercup.
The deal. That's the deal. All right. Everything's cinched up. We're good to go.
Yeah. So Paton, here's the deal. I have spent hours and hours and days and weeks with you behind ink on paper. Get a Grip was like walking through our EOS implementation. It was a fable story that just invited me into the EOS. So if you haven't read Thrive Collective, Get a Grip. It's Paton's book that he has authored, co-authored with Gino Wickman. Fantastic read. Step-by-step walking a company through the EOS process. So it caught my attention. I reached out to you on LinkedIn and said, hey, we got to connect. And so here we are.
Thank you.
So I spent a lot of time with you, but the Thrive Collective, for some of them, this may be their first introduction to you. So help the Thrive Collective family get to know you a little bit. What's your story, Paton, in leadership?
Yeah, happy to do that, Rob. And I'll try and keep this reasonably brief, although I have a lot of years to cover here. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My father was a real estate broker and real estate investor. My mom worked in his business, ran the property management division. And so for me, my business career, started around the dinner table, watching my parents never be able to put their business down. And, that tends to create some sensibility towards business in you. So I was buying boxes full of candy at the local Five and Dime and selling them out of my locker. And I had a paper route. So I'm a lifelong entrepreneur looking to make a buck, right? And so 50 years later, I'm still trying to do that and enjoying the ride, to be honest with you. I went off to college, graduated with a degree in English. My first real career move out of college was to go into banking. I took a management training job at a 14 branch savings and loan in Columbus, Ohio. And my dad was so disappointed. He sat me down and said, Paton, you know what Mark Twain said about bankers, right? And I said, no, Dad, what? And he said, well, a banker is somebody who gives you an umbrella when it's nice outside and takes it back the minute it starts to rain. So the truth of the matter is, I always kind of knew that banking was a nice stepping stone for me to figure out what made for a successful business and a successful business owner. I felt more at home with my clients than I did, with other bankers. And so I left banking after about 10 to 12 years, much to my father's delight, and began my first of four opportunities to run or help run entrepreneurial companies. Two were great train wrecks. Two were great successes. I take responsibility for the train wrecks, and they're the things I'm most grateful for in my career, because we all know when we've been through hell and high water, that the challenges you face make you the person you are. And so everything I've learned from making mistakes, and I'm grateful for the wisdom that comes from that. After the fourth opportunity, which was a train wreck, I was struggling to reach the founding owner of an entrepreneurial company and find a way to collaborate with her to take it to the next level. And a neighbor introduced me to EOS. This was about 14 years ago. And I read that was right after the initial printing of the book Traction. The ink was still wet. And I read it and fell in love with it. It was very simple, very practical. I could see it not only helping the struggling companies I was trying to lead, but also having been helpful in the companies that were great successes, right? And so I knew Gino had something there. And so I was curious, and I ended up spending some time with Gino and Don Tinney, decided to fly off to Detroit and become an EOS implementer a little less than 14 years ago. And the rest is history. I've been helping entrepreneurs get what they want from their businesses ever since. I spent 5 years running EOS worldwide as the successor to Gino Wickman in the visionary seat. And last March 2020, I stepped down to refocus my time and attention on being a professional EOS implementer, because that's what I was put on the planet to do and what I enjoy doing more than anything else.
I love the thread of growth through each of those stages. I mean, some things never change. The curiosity and entrepreneurial spirit that you had in the early days, I could just see that carrying through as well.
Yeah.
And one of the many things I really respect about you, Paton, is just your eagerness to grow and develop in leadership. As I've listened to your podcast and I've read your books, just the curiosity that you bring to every role that you're in. Where does that come from? This curiosity to learn and grow. What have been some of the influential factors that have shaped that in you?
Yeah, so it's really two things. The first is that as a young man, I grew up in my grandparents' home for much of my young childhood. And my grandparents were both teachers. My grandmother was a sixth grade teacher. My grandfather was a high school math teacher. And both invested a lot of time and energy infusing in me a love of learning. And so I have a, sort of natural passion for contemplating something I don't fully understand to the point where I understand it. There's such tremendous satisfaction that comes to that. The other, quite frankly, is just a weakness in that much of my life, I was hell-bent on proving to everybody how smart I was and how right I was. And every time I screwed up something that was important to me, it was because I was more interested in being right than being smart. And I found that when I quit trying to articulate and advocate for my own position, I moved forward in my life a lot faster, because I was really listening to the wisdom and experience and perspective of the people around me. And so that has not come easily to me. Even to this day, it's very difficult, but I recognize the value of that. And so it's tempered that sort of, bravado where you want to puff up your own chest and win every argument.
Well, I just love it. I hear just this idea of humbling your own perspective to be curious, to learn from others, and subordinate, really listening to with empathy and authority. As a story brand guide, we talk about this all the time. You got to walk in with empathy rather than trying to force your perspective. Seek first to understand, then be understood.
Right. And be prepared to be wrong. I think the dangerous thing in the world today is certainty. There's so many people who are cocksure they're right and everybody else is wrong. And as a result, we're just not anywhere near as good at listening as we used to be. And when you listen, you learn, period.
Yeah, so good. So good. So you've listened over the years, and that listening and curiosity has shaped your leadership. And, it's kind of interesting because the topic of leadership, Paton, it's one of those that probably if we lined up 50 executives and asked them all to define leadership as a term, we'd get 50 different definitions in a lot of ways, maybe some common things. I'm just curious, as we kind of enter into this discussion today, how does Paton define the term leadership? What does that mean to you?
Well, I'm I'm going to quote Simon Sinek, who I was fortunate to meet many, many years ago when Start With Why had first come out, and I helped the local EO chapter bring him to Minneapolis to do a chapter event, and I got to spend the day with them. And when he went on stage, he asked the audience something really funny. He said, "Who can tell me one thing all leaders have in common?" And 3 or 4 people volunteered an answer, which was wrong. And I only regret that I wasn't one of the goobers who thought he had the right answer to this question too. And Sinek was kind of having fun with the audience. And he said, the one thing all leaders have in common is followers. And that has always resonated with me, is sort of the de facto answer to that question. I don't know what leadership is, Rob, but I know that people who are effective leaders have followers for some crazy combination of reasons that make sense to the followers. What you and I think about it doesn't matter one iota. And this is why I'm so curious about leadership, because you can have styles ranging from military drill sergeant, take no prisoners, to I'm happiest in the toddler room of a daycare center because I just like to nurture and cuddle everybody. And everything in between, you can be an effective leader, but you can also have all those styles and be a terrible leader. And so I don't think there's a simple answer. I think it's behaving in a way that people want to follow you on whatever journey you're on.
Isn't that interesting? I love the idea of leadership means that you're really stewarding followers. You've got people that are following, which, yeah, clearly that makes sense. It's so funny though, because you could go to a leadership conference, read a leadership book, and really not have a following, but think that you're doing leadership. But at the end of the day, by definition, to lead means others have to follow in that. So it's about influence there. It's just, I really like the simplicity of that. So, okay, you've had followers, whether in companies and organizations that you've led, as an EOS, a certified EOS implementer. Of course, you've got to influence the followers of the companies and clients that you're serving. You've got a following that you've built with your EOS Leader podcast. There's got to be some challenges woven in through that leadership journey. It's not all rosy. So can you think, Paton, of a challenge or two that you've experienced in your leadership journey over the last few decades? And I'm just curious to explore those challenges that you've experienced and what lessons you've learned from those.
Yeah. So for the record, I can think of 2 challenges in the last 10 minutes of my leadership journey, but I'm trying to think of 1 or 2 profound things to share.
Yeah.
So, number one, I'll talk about the challenge I had as the visionary for EOS Worldwide as it was growing and changing at a pace that exceeded my capacity. And, quite frankly, I was overwhelmed. I was frustrated. I was not at my best at home and at work. And yet I felt obligated to my leadership team members and the founders and the shareholders and everybody on the planet to do my level best. And it finally dawned on me that I was holding the company back, and I was really hurting all those people more than helping them by pretending to really want to work super hard to meet their needs. What had happened is EOS Worldwide's visionary seat had become a full-time job, and I had committed only 80 days a year to doing that job. And I'm not sure I had all of the skills and experiences that would have made me successful in the job, even if I were working full time. And so I was at an inflection point where I had to decide either to lead EOS Worldwide full time, assuming the shareholders and my integrator agreed that was the right thing for the business, or be an EOS implementer full time, or whatever, retire and go fishing for a living or whatever it was. And I really struggled acknowledging that that was the choice I needed to make. I kept trying to find a way to make everything work. And so, ultimately, thank goodness I was clear. And I was clear because I thought, I consulted my family, I consulted God. My mind, body spiritualist gave me some advice that was really helpful, not to try and figure out the whole next 20 years, but to just think about what the next step in the path towards the riverbank was. I'm in the middle of a river with water rushing all around. Just pick the next step, right? And so that is one that I think was really important, and it's one that I see my clients struggle with all the time when their seat has grown beyond their own capacity. We tend to not want to wrestle with that early enough to not feel rushed to make an emotional decision. And I struggled with that too. So that's one of them.
I think that there's every listener listening to this podcast or replay has probably been there, Paton, especially if they've been on the field for some time. Because if you do your job well as a visionary, as a leader, things will grow. It will begin to scale. Right. And if it continues to do that beyond the constraints, you see so many good leaders burning out.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in that, whether, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, like, when did you start to feel that? How long did it take you to discern that major decision? And any advice, if somebody's listening saying, man, they're driving right now home from work, feeling that tension.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, so just so you hear me say this, the only reason I was even remotely able to process all this and come to a decision that I think served the company well and definitely served me and my family well is that I teach other entrepreneurs how to stay connected to their passion, take control of their lives and their businesses, and manage their time and energy well. And to be candid with you, the one thing that really ate away at me more than anything else is I'd be coaching my clients and I'd stand in the front of the room feeling a little bit like a fraud. Hey, I want you to live the EOS life. Well, I'm not living the EOS life. So how can I, be an able-bodied guide to help people do that? And so the first thing I did was I just reckoned with the disconnect between what I wanted and what was happening in my life. I took inventory, and I said, what are the root causes? My wife and I sat down, I did a Ben Franklin analysis, pros and cons, and without giving too much away, what I want you to know is the pros of me just being an EOS implementer were I was going to reduce stress and live a better life. That was pro number one. I was going to be able to fully engage with my family when I came home from work. Number two, I was going to make more money. Number three, and I was going to have more time to pursue other passions. Number four. So, and if you added number five, I was going to go home most days feeling like I was pretty good at my job. Should have been number five, but I didn't have the courage to write that word down. So, when you start reckoning with what you're feeling and you start making lists, you look at a list like that, you're like, why would I even make a con list? Right?
Yeah.
It's just silly. And so once I did that, once I reckoned, Rob, it really happened fast. And to the credit of the people around me, I got nothing but undying support from my integrator, from the shareholders, from our business partners, from the leadership team. Nobody said anything other than good for you, Paton. We want you to get what you want. And I think that was such a huge relief. And I want your listeners to hear the people around you who care about you want you to be well. And when you're not well, your fear that you're going to let them down is just kind of silly.
This is straight wisdom from like life experience, Paton. I'm loving this. I have a follow-up question, just because I think this is such a relevant topic. We didn't even know we'd end up here. We're here now. And so let's just lean into it.
Yeah. Do you have a leather couch and a box of Kleenex I could grab onto here, Rob?
Yes. Welcome to the counseling.
I might start chain smoking before we're done. So,
but I just think though, Paton. So here's the deal: like the challenges that we go through and we learn from. There's kind of two ways to learn a lesson in life. One is through enduring those challenges ourselves,
Mhm.
and the other is through gaining wisdom from somebody else who's endured those challenges. I kind of feel like that's where we're at today. So if I were to ask you 10 years ago, Paton, how do you define success?
Yeah.
Compared to today, Paton, how do you define success? What's changed in that definition?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to think for a second before I respond.
Yeah.
Right away I can tell you what today's success means. Today success is I'm at peace and I'm helping the people I care about most be at peace. That's today.
That's beautiful.
The definition of success 10 years ago was external, extrinsic,
Yeah.
leading people, making plenty of money, appearing to be important, having lots of followers on Instagram, if that's even a thing. Do you
I
have
don't even know if that
followers
was
on
around 10
Instagram?
years ago.
I don't know. I don't know whether you're liked. I don't know what they're called, but and I think age has some value, and then that never ending pursuit of external accomplishments, you when you achieve enough of them and don't get that inner satisfaction that you're looking at, you're forced to contemplate the fact that you might be faulty in your logic, right? Like, I've achieved some amazing things in my life and career for which I'm internally grateful and wouldn't trade for the world, but none of them made me happy, fulfilled, content, or satisfied. None of them. Being at peace and watching my 14-year-old who's stressed out about some completely irrelevant thing in his life, which feels like the most important thing on the planet, watching him come to me, who's always been a lunatic, and ask for advice on how to be calmer, that brings me joy. That brings me peace. And I am not able to get that feeling from extrinsic accomplishments. So that's what I'm all about today. And it does make it easier when some of the extrinsic things are there and you have time to be there for your kids. I totally get that. And I don't want to come off like one of those self-help gurus that professes you can flip a switch on the wall and everything changes tomorrow and you're going to be some shaman always at peace. But that's the journey you are on. And the sooner you recognize it, the quicker you're going to get there.
I mean, this is real wisdom. I mean, truly, Paton. It's almost as if I think some of us listening in, and those of you who are tuning in the car or wherever you're in the shower, wherever you're listening to Paton and my conversation here, I gotta think that there's at least a couple of you that are dealing with this right now. You're burning the candle at both ends. You're really burning the candle at both ends for noble motives. It's like you started your business 5-10 years ago, and of course it all relied on your shoulders. And so you had to do everything. The challenge is you haven't gotten out of that gear and you're still using a startup mentality in second stage. And what I hear is, like, you got to think differently. And as you advance through your leadership journey, we're hearing some of the lessons of what it looks like on the other side of that. Paton, what would you say if you were sitting with a startup entrepreneur who was kind of looking for some leadership wisdom, kind of nuggets of gold? What advice, given your experience in the early stages of your career in startup, now knowing what you know, what advice would you give somebody in that startup phase?
Yeah, so most startups are driven by passion and skill, right? I'm passionate about having an impact in some way, and I happen to be skilled at a thing that'll allow me to have that impact. And so, I think the advice to the startup is never, ever, ever lose sight of that. But also recognize that your organization's ability to execute is going to be more important than your individual passion and skill sometime soon. And you need to start laying the foundation for that to transfer out of your control and into the control of the other people you're hiring before you know it's important. That's where I think a lot of folks, Peter Drucker's famous quotation is, the bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. the more vital you are to your organization, the more likely you are to be the bottleneck when you're unable to achieve your growth goals and not cause chaos. So be aware of both your gifts and the finite nature of your gifts as you grow and scale.
So I love that quote. The bottleneck's always at the top of the bottle. And you also said, before you know you need it.
Yeah.
Did I hear you right? To externalize, to build either
Yeah.
systems or delegate training others before you feel you'll need it. Why is that a statement? Is that a pretty common thing that you feel?
Yeah, it's super common. So there's all kinds of reasons for that, Rob. Number one, when you're a startup, every cent counts, not just every dollar, but every cent counts. When I became an entrepreneur after working in bigger organizations my whole career, I all of a sudden stopped throwing away paper clips, right? I would fish in trash cans for paper clips I mistakenly threw away because every cent counts. And so there's a fiscal responsibility thing going on there where you're not going to spend money on something until it's absolutely necessary. And the problem with that is that you start costing your company money before you solve your capacity problem by investing in a talented resource to support you. Okay. You start getting overwhelmed. You're less on top of your game. You're missing your kids' sporting events, and your spouse is pissed off at you. And so you're distracted during the day. There's all kinds of things that are happening before you spend your first dollar on your first employee that are negatively impacting your company's effectiveness. And it's only when that happens repeatedly and you feel awful and you're overwhelmed and you've got to either hire somebody or you're going to shut this thing down and go take a job with a big company down the street, that's when you make the hiring decision. It's certainly been true of me. So there are probably entrepreneurs out there way smarter than me that don't have this problem. But honestly, Rob, working with thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 14 years, I've probably heard that story 600 times. 600 times. And it's kind of like, if you're worth $400 an hour to your company when you're working in your sweet spot, what you love to do and are best at, and you're doing $25 an hour work, something you could hire an administrative assistant to do, you're costing your company $375 an hour, period. And we don't think about it that way. We think we're saving money when we don't spend $25 an hour for a person who's going to be 10 times better at the administrative menial tasks than we are.
Yeah, great advice for the startup to really be thinking bigger. I don't know if it was you in a podcast or maybe a different environment. I heard make 10-year decisions. What's this? If I'm pinching pennies and saving paper clips and spending 2 hours a day to do that, what's the implications of that in 10 years?
Yeah, that's Gino talking about the 10 ways to manage your energy well is 10-year thinking.
Yeah.
This dollar you're saving today could be $100,000 5 years from now. Come on, stepping over dollars to pick up, or stepping over nickels to pick up dollars.
Exactly. I love it. And if somebody's a bit more advanced in the career, I know you've worked with companies big and small, kind of, what advice would you give a leader who's been on the trail for some time and maybe is kind of hitting that leadership and business plateau? Any advice that you've gained that you would offer to them?
Yeah, for sure. That's the sweet spot for EOS implementers, right? 10 to 250 people, privately held. The company's gotten stuck one or more times, and the owner and leadership team are struggling to get it unstuck without help. And so, my biggest piece of advice there is, you don't have to figure it all out yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. EOS isn't for everybody or every company or every leader. But there are lots of systems for running a business out there, and there are lots of business coaches and helpers out there. There are great roundtable groups that you can join. I would just urge you, when you're not seeing the business results you want or living the life you want, don't feel like you have to figure that out yourself. Go get some help.
Yeah, I love it. And as a small business owner, sometimes you could be so close to your business that that you have a hard time seeing it objectively.
Mhm.
So working with a guide like Paton can help give you some of that perspective to see your business a little differently and perhaps map that path forward through the forest. So,
Yeah.
um,
And just to make everybody who's struggling with that feel a little bit better, know that that's human nature, right? When you're drowning and a lifeguard swims out to save your life, your automatic human response is to fight them off, even though they're there to save you. It's just the way we're hardwired psychologically and sociologically. And so know that this sounds easy when somebody like me says it, but it is hard and feels counterintuitive. And yet I've seen it work over and over and over again. So trust that somebody out there who's got the right desire to help and skills to help is probably worth a phone call or a coffee meeting or 90 minutes in a conference room.
so there's a lot of ways to seek help, small business leader, mid-sized business leader. In fact, Paton, I know you're working on a few projects right now, even. The EOS Leader podcast is an excellent resource. Go over, subscribe now, and listen. I mean, give us a little sense of EOS Leader podcast. You interview small business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs from across the globe, really, that bring advice and counsel and their stories to the table too.
Folks ranging from people who own wellness spas in the middle of nowhere in Canada to an NFL player and his agent that are building an incubator for minority-owned businesses. And so what I'm trying to do is interview a really broad spectrum of international leaders to create a couple of things. Number one, this sense that all these unique things we feel as leaders of our own organizations and often feel like there's nobody on the planet we can talk to about it, right? I know when your family is tired of hearing you bitch about your business and your friends don't even pick up the phone when you call them anymore because it always seems you want to bitch about, and your employees or your leadership team members are the ones that are driving you crazy so you can't talk. It is a lonely feeling. So I'm trying to reduce the loneliness. And then the second thing I'm trying to do is help us all feel like we're dealing with the same set of problems, challenges, and obstacles. And there are 27 different ways to tighten that screw. And maybe one of those 27 is something you haven't thought of before. And I might unlock a couple of things for you by asking questions and being genuinely interested in what people have to say about their own leadership journeys.
Yeah, so tune in. The EOS Leader podcast, an excellent resource. Mike Paton's also book author of Get a Grip with Gino Wickman. Pick up a copy wherever you purchase books, Amazon.com. Get a Grip is a step-by-step field guide, a fable that walks kind of through the lens of a company, almost in first person point of view. You get a chance to see what it looks like to implement the systems and process for the EOS toolkit. And then Mike, I know that you're working on a project right now. Are you comfortable sharing kind of what's in the laboratory in terms of process? I know, Paton, you've got this new project that you're working on too.
Yeah.
Right?
So for your listeners that know what EOS is, there are 6 key components in the EOS model. We believe businesses are either weak or strong in the vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction components. And one of the components that our clients either resist strengthening or struggle to strengthen is the process component. And so Lisa Gonzalez, a world-class implementer out of Denver, and I are working together to write a deep dive into the art and science of strengthening your process component. And it's really designed to, I say that to you on this podcast, knowing at least half your listeners are going to think, oh my God, I'm an entrepreneur. Process, that's not for me. And that's kind of the point of the book, is that to be free to be an entrepreneur as you grow and scale your company, the people that execute day to day in your business need to execute with discipline, consistency, and accountability. And strengthening the process component is the way to make that happen without creating a bureaucracy, without eliminating the need for independent thinking, creativity, innovation, et cetera. And that's what we're trying to share with the world. This is not a false dilemma between chaos and a rigid corporate bureaucracy. There's a way to get a little structure, discipline, accountability, and consistency, and still run a free, nimble, flexible entrepreneurial company. So hopefully that's an exciting concept to the folks that are listening today.
It is, because it's probably the squeakiest wheel for many entrepreneurs and small business leaders that are out there. It truly is. So I mean, to have you as a visionary, because that kind of is your natural tendency to be the visionary, writing material on the process component. Yeah. Those two, for me as a visionary, I feel like oil and water. So to have another fellow visionary writing about process, I'm all in. I want to be on the first to know when that book gets released. And
fall of 2022 is the tentative publication date. Look forward to it.
Okay, look forward to it. Absolutely. Well, Paton, it's been a joy to have you on the Thrive Collective today. As we wrap up our time, is there one final piece of advice, one, kind of like last thing that you'd like to share with the small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders who tune in? I would welcome you to share that last piece of advice. And then if somebody wanted to reach out to you for a potential engagement or to explore that, how might they best do it?
Yeah, so I'll start with the contact information first, and then I'll share a piece of advice. So EOSworldwide.com is a website that can share more about EOS than I can in this or any podcast. And so it's a one-stop shop. And I welcome people finding my bio page on that website and reaching out to me directly to ask for help. I'd also urge your listeners to find a local EOS implementer in your community to partner up with, because it does help to have somebody you can meet with and connect with on a personal basis. In terms of piece of advice, I've been signing my emails "Stay Focused" for many, many years, which is somewhat ironic for a visionary. But I learned that from Gino, and I've recently changed it to "Enjoy the Journey." And the aha here is, most entrepreneurs I know pour their hearts and souls into their company, their people, their customers, even their vendors. Much of the time, it's to their own detriment. The sacrifices we make personally in order to serve all these other constituents are crazy. If you're not having fun, something is wrong. Enjoy the journey. You should have fun every day, most days. I mean, come on, every day's crazy, but most days, enjoy the journey. That's my one piece of advice. Hope this podcast helped at least one listener get a little closer to making that happen.
Amen. And this is going to be one of those episodes, Paton, that I go back and listen to time and time again, just to relive this experience. It was so great to have you on the show. Thank you for your investment in the Thrive Collective family. And Thrive Collective, this is your show. We bring on subject matter experts and key leaders like Paton to bring in subjects and topics that help you revenue generation, make more money, avoid costly mistakes, which burnout, man, that could be so costly, both for yourself personally and then also for your company. And then my heart is to help you fully integrate your faith into your life and leadership. I am Rob Hughes, your host. It's a joy to have each of you tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we'll see you at the next episode. Take care.